Welcome to the Grampians Wine podcast. I'm your host, Neil Butler. In each episode of the podcast, we speak to a representative of the Grampians Winemakers or one of the wineries in the region. We'll learn about the wines, the wineries, and of course, the personalities associated with one of Victoria's leading wine regions. On today's episode, we speak to Rory Lane, the owner winemaker at the Story Wines located in Melbourne. Hang on a minute. Welcome, Rory. This is the Grampians Wine podcast. Why are we talking to someone who's in Melbourne?
Oh, well, look, that's a great question. It sometimes mystifies me as to why I'm in Melbourne, but am considered part of the Grampians wine region. But the short story, if I may use that term, is that I've always lived in Melbourne, but I love the Grampians as a winemaking region, and that's where I wanted to make wine. But I wasn't from there, so it was either move out there or stay where I am in town with a young family and find a way to bring the grapes back to town and do it that way.
So I guess the ingredients are what make you part of the Grampians wine region more so than anything else.
That's right. That's where all our raw materials come from. That's and the raw materials are what make great wine. So we've got a few growers who grow grapes for us out in the Grampians, and I've been taking those grapes back to Melbourne since 2004 now. So it's 17 or 18 years.
Okay. So you know the Western Highway pretty well then, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah. Like it's a well-worn road for me, particularly leading up to harvest. I'm backwards and forwards down past Ballarat and through Beaufort and out to Great Western a couple of times a week. Definitely.
Okay.
No, well-worn path.
So tell us how long you've been going and the varieties you produce and what sort of production you've got in terms of annual production.
Well, like most Grampians producers, the region is very heavily skewed towards Shiraz, and I make Shiraz, and that's the reason I wanted to get into making wine from that region in the first place. I just love Grampians Shiraz. It's such a distinctive flavour profile, and the Grampians produces Shiraz unlike anywhere else in the country, full of pepper, which is something that's probably more seen in cooler climate regions and dare I say European regions. But that's what I love. So the bulk of our production is Shiraz, but we also make Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, Grenache, Mourvèdre, and I'm probably leaving something out. A few other bits and pieces when I can get access to some other good things. But that's the bulk of it. And we produce about 3,000 cases a year. So we're certainly a small winery by Australian industry standards. But the Grampians is a pretty small region. So we'd be in the top 5 or 6, I reckon, in production in the region. There's the big guys, and then there's a big drop off to the little blokes like us.
And that's when you start using words like boutique, because it sounds so much better than little, doesn't it?
That's right.
So what is it about the Grampians wine region that makes growing grapes really good up there? We've talked to a number of other winemakers in the region, but what do you reckon it is about the region that makes the grapes good?
Look, there's no one thing. There's a lot of contributing factors to it. I mean, you can talk about soil and climate, and they're all very, very important. But really, it's the confluence of all those things that make it special. There are other places that have a similar climate. There are other places that would have reasonably similar soil types, but you put those two things together, plus the sheer history and fact that there's been grapes grown in the region for 150 years, and that brings with it a lot of knowledge. It's that what you in corporate world you'd call institutional knowledge that is basically just lots of great families that have been around the region for a long, long time, working out how best to do it. And then so you match that up with your soil and your climate and the right grape varieties planted in the right place, and you've got the ingredients for something pretty special and something that delivers a really unique flavour profile.
Because I guess the thing too, obviously I'm involved in talking to a number of winemakers in the region, and that community component of it is quite strong, isn't it? It seems as though you've got a couple of big guys, as you mentioned, and they obviously bring with that the broader experience and the broader knowledge of the market, but the small people who are doing almost passion projects, I guess in some respects, brings together a really interesting community and diverse community as well.
Yeah, certainly. And you do get to know, even though I am 2.5 hours away, you do get to know the people in the community really well. And I have a huge amount of respect for a lot of the smaller winemakers in the region. They all help each other out. We ask each other questions. We're constantly talking about winemaking techniques, sharing knowledge. We get together for reasonably frequent winemaker tastings, just to, hopefully not bag each other's wines too much, but to learn from each other, and that community spirit's there.
Yeah, and I mean, I've obviously spoken to a few of you, and I think the one thing that seems to come through quite strongly is that question of respect for other people's businesses. And there's that whole thing about the sum of the parts is more important than the individual parts, or whatever that saying is. You know what I'm saying? It becomes a really important destination, I suspect.
Yeah, it does. And I think when you got what is a very, we'll call it boutique region rather than small region,
specialist.
A specialist region. Well, but when you've got a region that doesn't have a huge critical mass, then each part does become really important, and people do have to support each other and help each other out, and that's part of what makes the Grampians a really nice place to visit too. Is that you do get that sense of it not being a big showy touristy glamour kind of place. It has a real authenticity, and and people love that sense of connection to growers and winemakers that are there making, and in most instances being the person that stands behind the counter at the cellar door selling it as well. So people love to have that sense of connection to who actually gets their hands dirty and makes the stuff.
And I guess that's what the importance of this podcast series is we're meeting the people behind the counter, as it were. And some of those are quite large organizations. And as we've said, some of them are, two partners running a business together. And it's just a great concept right across the board for mine. So where do we see the Story Wines in 5 years' time? Will they be part of the Grampians scene, or will they continue to be a Melbourne-based organization sourcing their ingredients from Grampians?
I would say that we'll make a few cautious steps closer to the region. I choose my words carefully there, but I do have a young family, and we'll be in Melbourne. We'll be living in Melbourne, but we're looking at taking a greater control of some of the vineyards that we buy grapes from. We're looking at leasing a vineyard at the moment and controlling the farming of that 100%. And I'd say in 5 years we'll probably be, hopefully, just delivering higher and higher quality through the attention that we put into the vineyards.
Yeah, fair enough. So what was your first role? We're now going to talk about you, not just your winery. What was your first role in the wine industry?
I suppose, look, I went to do winemaking as a postgrad, a uni postgrad. I did a terribly unvocational arts degree, which I don't regret for a second, because it was great fun and it taught me lots of good things about critical thinking and aesthetics and respect for beautiful things, which is what wine is. But I was looking for something else to do after that, and as luck would have it, Monash Uni had just started a winemaking course, and so I went, it sounds pretty interesting. I'll give that a go, and just fell in love with it. So post uni, I did a couple of small stints at wineries through uni, and I'd say my first full-time role was not in production at all. It was actually as a marketing manager for a Yarra Valley-based winery. Which I did for 2 or 3 years, because I thought it was really important to understand the business side of owning and running a wine business. Because it's all well and good to make the stuff, but if you can't sell it and you can't communicate and you can't connect with consumers, then you haven't got much hope. So that's what I do.
You'll be drinking a lot, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Which, hopefully your product's good and you can enjoy doing that. But if you want to put some food on the table, you've got to learn how to sell the stuff.
Absolutely. So you're going on a road trip and you can only take one case of wine from the Story Wines. What do you take with you?
I think if I was going on a road trip, I'd want to be showing people what we do best. I'd take a cup. If it's a single case, it would have to be our top wine, which is our Westgate Vineyard Syrah, Shiraz, same thing, because it's a wonderful old vineyard and the quality's undeniable. And that's the wine I really hang my hat on. And if you go out with your big guns, that's the one that I'd take with me. Absolutely. But it does, of course, depend on what circumstances you find yourself in. We make a little Processo of all things as well, and that's a pretty fun drink. Not many people dislike that.
Absolutely. So you've got one of your glasses of Syrah with you, and you need to put a meal with it. What's your favourite meal to have with a glass of that?
Oh, I'd have to say it would be very rare lamb, probably like rare lamb cutlets or something like that, with just a really simple red wine jus would be just delicious with it.
So we've got the wine poured, we've got the lamb cutlets just cooked enough. What's your favourite location to have that meal and that drink?
Look, the location doesn't matter as long as the people are good. So as long as I'm with my family and my best friends, that's all that matters.
Well, we're going to
Which unfortunately we haven't been able to do that all that much. Being in Melbourne, we've just come out of lockdown today, so I'm looking forward to getting back and doing that very soon.
Yeah, well, either that or take your own Zoom call with you, one or the other. Your favourite music you have playing while that meal is being consumed?
Oh, you typically can't hear any music because the kids are yelling too much. So I wish I could hear some music.
With small children, it's probably hot potato, or something.
That's right. The Wiggles in the background and the strains of, Dad, can you get me another insert food item here?
Yeah, I hope not a glass of Shiraz, judging by their age. So 3 people, living or dead, that you could have at that meal. Who would you have with you?
Well, in keeping with the family thing, I think it would have to be, it'd have to be my wife and 2 children. But if we're going to throw a couple of past people, I would say I would love to have a meal with Colin Priest, who was one of the legends of the Grampians winemaking scene, and one of Australia's iconic winemakers. I think I could have learned a lot from him had I ever met him. And maybe my grandfather, who loved a yarn and loved a great glass of wine.
2 things that are inextricably linked, aren't they?
That's true.
Yeah. So before we wind up, we've had a few people talking about their cellar doors, but you don't have one because you're not in the Grampians. How can people purchase your wines? Where can they go to buy them?
Well, the simple answer, as we're on an online podcast, is to go online. Go to thestory.com.au. We because we don't have a cellar door, we try really hard to engage people through that medium. We run lots of online tastings, which is perfect for people in lockdown. So that's a good way to try the product. I'd encourage people to go to the website, check it out there. We've got a bunch of different smaller packs available that people can have a bit of a sample of. And if not there, then if you're not in lockdown, there's plenty of good restaurants in town that stock our wines. So go and check out our stockists online.
And that's at thestory.com.au. Social media?
Yes, Story Wines on Instagram and on Facebook.
Okay. Well, Rory, thanks for joining us on the Grampians Wine podcast today.
Thanks a lot, Neil. I really appreciate it.
This has been another episode of the Grampians Wine podcast featuring Rory Lane from The Story Wines. You can subscribe to the podcast by visiting grampianswinepodcast.com.au. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but it will give you the chance to listen to previous episodes and to be reminded whenever we publish another episode. You can watch video versions of the podcast by subscribing to the Grampians Wine YouTube channel. We'll be back soon with another episode. My name is Neil Butler. I look forward to your company then. Cheers.